Welcome to your new podcast, The Next Wave, Island Youth Portraits. Here, you will hear young people from islands around the world talking about their daily lives, what inspires them, and what drives them. Every week, a new episode, a new changemaker who inspires us. From one hemisphere to another, we are all connected and passing the mic to those who are too often overlooked. Subscribe now and enjoy the wave. So, hi everyone, I hope you're doing well. Today we are going to Greenland with someone that is really special, really inspiring young woman that I have the chance to consider as a friend, Naja-Theresia. She's a law student from Qaqortoq. Did I pronounce it kind of well?
Almost, yeah.
I'm gonna let you say it afterwards. It's gonna be better. But so we will talk today about international partnerships, youth cooperation, youth mental health, which is really important to Naya, and how also culture carries values forward. So Naya, thank you. I hope you're doing well too. Could you please introduce yourself a little bit more?
Sure. Thank you so much for inviting me, Lona. I think that you're so good at just kind of initiating things for youth to start a discussion, and I'm really glad that I can be a part of this podcast.
Thank you.
But yes, but yeah, I'm from what we call Qaqortoq. It can be hard to pronounce. We have our own language, and it's very different from like European or just kind of like American or English languages in general. But yeah, so that's where I'm from. As Ilona said, I've also kind of been involved in youth initiatives, and those are kind of also the things that I've really been passionate about in the last few years. And currently, I'm still continuing with that, but maybe focusing even more on mental health.
That's great. Just the way you pronounce your city is amazing. Like, I love to hear it. I could never say it like you do. Also, could you say, because of course I'm saying Greenland, but could you say like the native word for Greenland? Because same, I'm gonna butcher it if I'm trying to, but I think it was also important to mention
Of
it.
Yeah, so we have our own native wordings, and of course, the name of our country would be Galashit Nunat, which means the land of the Galashit. And Galashit is the name of the people. It's not a ethnicity, but the name
Yeah.
of the people who live on the land.
Okay,
So
that's so great. Thank you very
yeah.
much. So, we met 3 years ago with the first cohort of the Overseas Countries and Territories Youth Network. And of course, we've been in contact more or less since then, and I've been following your work. And when I was doing some research to prepare this podcast, I found your speech that you gave 2 years ago at the EU Arctic Forum. Like, I found it was
Oh.
amazing. Like, I really loved it, and I will probably put a link to this speech. And you said, like, nothing about us without us, about youth involvement. Would you say there is... I mean, I was wondering what's a recent moment where you felt youth were at the table? Like, did you felt at some point recently that finally something was happening about us with us?
You know, youth participation can be a tricky thing, especially when in the last few years I've been kind of involved also in the policy making, also in like group settings of youth trying to make a policy recommendation together. But every time I think there's always a big step forward still for youth to be equally involved in policy making, especially in my own country in Greenland. Youth involvement is kind of non-existent.
Yeah.
Uh, so I think, and to the point where it's our own responsibility as youth to figure out how we want to be involved instead of being invited to the table. We actually have to like really, really fight to be seated with policymakers.
You're not gonna have like invitations or like someone you can
No.
say you can candidate to something or anything. You directly have to ask the people to create something.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
I can see, which is really interesting also because I was reflecting a little bit too on my experience of those last years, and I feel like it's interesting because you are invited to so many things, but so many of them you're just there to be labeled as youth. Like you have real youth for youth involvement, and you have people like, okay, we want to have youth, but for the image and everything. And at the end you're just going to be there for the picture or for them to say, we have youth. But I don't know if you can relate on that.
I have experienced those things too many times, also in conferences or symposiums or in anything where youth probably have a little bit of time to be, and we're usually given a word just by the end of the event where
Yeah.
everyone's not there anymore. And I remember last year I participated in something called the Arctic Future Symposium in Brussels. And I was in the first panel. I was very lucky to be there on the first panel. And one of the things that I wanted to talk about was, or ask the diplomats and the politicians and other policymakers who were at the room, how do you want to be approached by youth?
Mm.
Because I think that's also a really important conversation to have with the people who are there. It's actually just asking them, how would it benefit you the most in how I'm participating, instead of me trying to figure out how do they want me to contribute in a positive way, but having them tell us this is because they know the system much better than we
Yeah.
do. So them to start commenting on, maybe it would be best if you participate in this way and in this way, because I also think that a lot of the times there's really good intentions with the policymakers inviting us to
Mm.
conferences, to policymaking, or to any events, but we somehow haven't figured out how do we take advantage of that.
I totally see what you mean. Of course, yeah. What I was saying is not that those persons have bad intentions, of course. They're trying to involve youth, which is already a big step because not everyone is doing that. But it's true that it could be a whole other podcast subject, but about the multi-generational gap sometimes that, um, I mean, you still need to adjust and to have something to do there. Building on that, is there a result or I don't know an outcome of your commitment of those last years, and is there something you wanted to share?
Of my youth participations, I would say one of the things that have been it has really impacted me to participate in policymaking or just youth initiatives and overall. I've been in a lot of EU related youth initiatives, and I've been advising a commissioner on youth related things, especially mental health. And one of the things, I feel like there's personally a lot of things that I took with me. And for example, now I'm starting to build an organization based on the things that I've learned throughout the last few years. I wouldn't be able to even imagine how I could build an organization if I didn't meet other youth initiatives who could inspire me to create my own. So I think also just kind of when I'm attending these conferences, I'm trying to also be critical at the people who invited me as well. Like, let's think out of the box a little bit more. And I've been trying to get a conversation up and going, especially when we're youth, we're inviting to initiatives or conferences or events. Because a lot of the times we don't hear from many of the minorities of youth that we have, especially also from a Greenlandic perspective, affected by climate change the most, or who are in settlements. So those are the youth that I think that we should also be hearing from these events. And it's going to be more expensive to hear from these youth, of course, because there's a lot of extra transportation. But that is the investment that we have to make to ensure that youth can benefit from the discussions that are being held by policymakers.
Congratulations first for your organization. That's so great to know
Thank
that
you.
you're building something like that. I think we're gonna move towards as you were mentioning, your organization. It's gonna be more about the mental health aspect for young people. You also advised Commissioner Helpline, and back then, mainly, I mean, you were a youth advisor, but your subject was mental health.
Um, I'm very passionate about giving more space to talk more about mental health awareness, especially among Indigenous people in the Arctic. We are facing a lot of the same things, and I think that there's a lot of common issues that we can find common solutions for. And we're from islands, right? And there's just, um, I mean, Greenland is the world's biggest island, and we
Mm.
have some we can have issues that are difficult to compare with to
Yeah.
other because we're in such a specific we have such specific circumstances. Like we don't have roads between cities or towns or settlements, and it can be difficult to reach mental health kind of service anywhere. So and the reason why I mean, I've also been personally affected by mental health issues. I've lost friends from mental health to suicide. Suicide is a really big thing, unfortunately. It started in the 50s and 60s, especially when Greenland had been, when Greenland was being Danified by the Danish state. So there was a lot of culturally, that's kind of the space or the time in our history where we started kind of losing the cultural practices and another society's model was trying to be fit into ours. And it affects people and it affects the indigenous people of this country. I think also just to the reason why I also kind of just wanted to talk about mental health is because I hope it's going to help me as
Yeah.
well. Going to help my friends, it's going to help my siblings, but also just hoping that we can save more than we lose every year. Um, every year, it's the same numbers that we have, and it's not going down yet.
Yeah.
And at this point, it's like the policymakers are waiting for the youth to do something about this crisis, which is, in my opinion, the biggest crisis that Greenland has at the moment. It's losing way too many young people to suicide. I- and I genuinely believe that without a thriving youth, we can't imagine a thriving society or a thriving
Yeah.
future because we're losing so many every year. And it's right that Greenland probably has one of the highest suicide rates in the world, maybe the highest suicide rate. I don't have the exact numbers on that, but it's very common to know either of someone very close to you who has lost someone or being close to someone who has lost someone very close to themselves. So everyone is affected by this illness. And yeah, and I hope that being more aware of the benefits of giving more funding and services to young people that we're gonna affect or make a positive change for young people.
Do you thank you for what you're saying first. That I feel like it's really brave, and I wanted to tell you first that I admire you a
Yeah.
lot for talking about the subject like that. Do you feel? Do you see the media, for example, talking about it in Greenland? Because I was wondering, as you were saying, that everybody knows someone that committed suicide in Greenland, but so everybody knows, I suppose, about this crisis. But do you feel like the media, for example, are talking enough about it? Do you feel like it's highlighted enough?
So I think that it's not highlighted enough. It's also an issue that youth don't know that youth should know that it's okay not to have a good day. And I feel like we could use a lot more energy into creating more posters or just have media attention on mental health. And we don't have that yet. Of course, there are some initiatives that have started that have benefited a lot of young people, I hope, where we have Greenlandic people who are educating themselves or even writing PhDs in health and suicide prevention. So I think that there's a big positive step already being taken. But one of the things that we really need is just to give funding to the youth to create a change for themselves. Right now, we're just kind of waiting for some youth to be brave enough to go to the media. But I feel like the media also needs to reach out to young people and actually hear what changes can be made instead of just waiting for one brave person or many more brave, because it's a really sensitive topic and it's difficult to talk about to the media. Everybody knows that suicide is a big problem, but it's such a sensitive topic that it's even difficult to talk about with your close ones because it can maybe open up some old wounds. And those blockades just keep continuing and we don't actually start the conversation. It could be great to see more of that in the media and actually hear about people who have come to the other side. Who have who have maybe had suicidal thoughts, who have had help. I would love to hear more from the media on positive news, or just even just also uh, telling about the current statistics or the negative news, because we need to hear about the actual problem, and
Yeah.
but also the kind of people who have sought help and gotten better.
Again, thank you. That resonates a lot, and those are really strong words, and I think, again, you're really brave. Like, this is a really small podcast and everything, but already for you to talk openly about it, it's really, really great, and I think you can be proud of yourself because
Oh,
you're
thank you.
really.
I'm glad that we get to talk about this because
Yeah.
it's such an important topic to even just have between two friends, and even just a podcast listener who can listen and just hear about um, that mental health is a thing that we really need to focus on. And numbers of people who are suffering from mental health is it's real. And I'm really glad that we could talk about it with you. Yeah.
As you were saying, with the organization you're building, you're trying to have an impact or policy. From your perspective today, do Greenland need to have like a community-based approach, like with peers, with families, with languages, cultures, school?
Yeah, good question. I think it's a really big question.
I was just okay, like from your own experience,
Yeah.
you could implement maybe one policy right now. Well,
Mhm.
yeah, or would you? Yeah.
Okay. So the reason why I wanted to create this organization, we're calling it Y9 for Youth 9, as in September, Youth September, because September is Mental Health Awareness Month, and also the month where we have Suicide Prevention Day. So we wanted to call it Y9. And basically, we're still trying to figure out how we want to approach this. I remember in the beginning, we were like, okay, we need to get youth to discuss how they feel and how they want to, and if they have any ideas for bettering the mental health of the friend right next to them. But then we started to realize we weren't giving the same questions to our own team. And then it suddenly became really hard for us, because then we were in a position where we had to ask the people that I'm making the organization with, we had to ask each other, like, what makes me, how do I feel? And what do I do to feel better? And it
Yeah.
suddenly became hard for us even to ask those questions for ourselves.
It's really personal at the end, like
It
it's
is.
it's a really personal subject, so yeah, I see how it can.
It is. And it's so important that we also, as the founders of the organization, that we can have those thoughts ourselves before we even reach out to youth and require them to ask those questions themselves, which are really hard to answer. That's just one of the few things that I think policymakers need to give space for. It's giving funding that youth can meet. Greenland is a extremely difficult place to travel in. Uh, Connect young people from every town. It's going to be, first of all, very expensive. I mean, it's going to take a lot of time to even get youth together. But for that to happen, we need funding from either the government or other uh, places, just to even hear each other out from different perspectives of Greenland, of how life is. First of all, I, for example, even just in South Greenland, I don't meet youth from every town or every settlement, because it's so difficult to just connect with each other. And just a little bit of funding would give us the possibility to gather young people and to ask those questions to each other of, what is it that makes me feel bad, or what is it that makes me feel good? And then after that, we can probably give policy suggestions to policymakers in how do we better the mental health of young people. So a quite long answer to a question.
A really, really good one. Like, it's really interesting because even if I talk with you before again, that's why I wanted to do this podcast because I'm learning so many things, even about Greenland. And yeah, like, I mean, also when we are talking about islands, and I remember like with the OCTs, it's generally like really small islands, like in the
Mhm.
tropics. And I feel like Greenland is really special for that also because it's so big, and so even though we are facing common challenges, I feel like, as you were saying at the beginning, Greenland also can't be compared with any other places. It's really, really, yeah, interesting. Do you like, because like you moved to Copenhagen then for your studies? I remember you talked to me about like an organization there for Greenlandic students arriving in Denmark. How do you feel about moving from Greenland to Denmark? If you can tell a bit more about also this perspective, that I think it's really linked to mental health too, because in the end you're going to a new country. So yeah, it's a big deal.
So, yeah, it's a big change for us even just to start an education.
Yeah.
I from my hometown of Qaqortoq, I either need to go to the capital Nuuk or to Denmark to have a university degree. And when I moved to Denmark to start my bachelor, I remember I just expected I wouldn't face any difficulty that was much more different than what the Danish students who were just also newly started would be experiencing. But that was the farthest from the truth. I
Mm.
think I realized how different our culture as Greenlandic people is compared to, for example, Danish or other European countries. I always just kind of assumed that Danish and Greenlandic would be kind of the same, but I quickly realized that was not the
Yeah.
case. And in the student organization that I have been a part of, we often talked about how we would appreciate, even before going to a university degree abroad, that we would love to have some kind of extra support so that we know what challenges that we are going to face when we arrive to Denmark, because there's also a lot of discrimination and racism against Greenlandic people in Denmark. And those are just one of the things that we would love to be prepared
Mm.
to before we move so that we know how to handle those situations. And at this point, they're kind of inevitable, but that you're going to face some kind of experience that while you're studying in Denmark. And yeah, it would be great for us to just get more support in getting us ready before we move uh, to another country, especially to your colonizer's
Mm.
country, because there's a lot of prejudice that people already have about you before you even move or before they even know who you are. They have assumptions about your culture and who you are as a person.
What I'm going to ask might sound a little bit dumb, but I was thinking as you were saying, do you have an accent when you're talking Danish? Like, is there an accent, a Greenlandic accent? Like, I suppose, but I like have no notion in Danish, of course. Like, is it because again, thank you for talking about this topic of racism, but do you feel like is it gonna be based on your way of talking and your way of dressing or the way you're looking? Like, because yeah, I was wondering how do you navigate all of those?
Yeah. So I think I mean, I haven't experienced quite as much as my friends have, for example, or my family members, because when you first see me, I would generally look like a Scandinavian person. So people wouldn't assume that I was Greenlandic. So one of the things that other Greenlandic people have experienced are much harsher than I have myself. It's very much based on how you look or just your name. Your name sounds Greenlandic, there's a lower possibility that you might get a job offer. So it's very much based on how you look or your name or whatever could signify that you have a Greenlandic background that could affect how you're treated.
And about the names, like, I think it's really interesting because I don't know if I told you, like, probably when we met, but I really think your name is beautiful. And I was wondering,
Oh,
like, it's a quick question like that. Can you maybe give the story of your name or some Greenlandic names?
so, yeah, my name first is Naja-Theresia. Theresia is, I think, yeah, European, but it's my grandmother from my mom's side. Her name is Derita. And then my parents kind of made it more modern, but Derita was Greenlandic and she's from South Greenland. She's my grandmother. But Naya, it means little sister in Greenlandic. So there's a lot of people who are called Naya in Greenland because I think just how do you call it? After you've had sons, you're when a daughter comes in, you probably name them Naya or Naya or Nayangwak or so there's a lot of women who are called Naya to symbolize that the person has older brothers or older sisters. A lot of symbolism behind our names.
Yeah.
There's people who are called, for example, Malik. It's in Greenlandic, it means waves. There's people who are called Uilok, which means seashells, or how do you call? So, yeah, so many names. And usually I mean, the Greenlandic language is also very visual, and we usually also have those visuals in our names, which is really beautiful.
That's really, really, again, super interesting, super beautiful also. Thank you. Maybe because I think it's important, we talk a lot about all those deep topics. I was wondering if you have some names of organization or support, maybe if someone from Greenland is listening to us or someone for Denmark, because I know, for example, in France, we have a special number when someone is feeling like in a mental distress, there is a specific number. Do you also have those kind of resources that you want to share?
Yeah, of course, I really want to share. With these conversations, you can have unexpected feelings
Mm.
after you've heard talk about difficult topics such as suicides or just mental health in general. So for Greenland, it would be to contact Tusaannga. We can add the phone number and also the chat line in
Yeah.
the description for you. And there's also a number in Denmark for Greenlandic people if or other people if you're needing help or just need someone to talk to because it's really nice to just contact someone and even just a hotline if you want to just kind of brief through how you're feeling at the moment because it's very much okay if there's some memories or some emotions that have unexpectedly kind of come through.
I wanted to add now that we talk about all those difficult subjects. Like it's someone on the phone that is not going to judge you. You're never going to see this person. So it's
Yeah,
just to know that you're talking not to yourself, you're not alone. You're talking to someone and can be really helpful. So thank you, Naya. And I will put all the
of course.
links,
Thank
phone
you.
numbers you're giving me in the description. That was interesting that we talked about names actually, because that's a good jump on some questions I wanted to ask you maybe more about like values and identity, because I think all of those are really interlinked in the end. I know again, I'm gonna talk, I'm gonna like quote you from your speech I read online, but you talk about reestablishing values so they fit today youth and today Inuit youth. I was wondering, reading the speech, like which values are you talking about? Do you have any idea of the ones who needs to be put up front?
Yeah. It's, I think such an important part of trying to figure out how to solve our problems. It's kind of looking back at our own identity and the culture that we come from, because our culture and identity is greatly rooted in your home and in your land. And this culture and our sense of identity has been shifted, and we need to refine that identity again. But the good thing is that it's still here with us. We still have elders who can teach us. We still have great people who are also kind of learning about our practices and bringing those back to us. One of the things that I think could be really beneficial for us would be because in our society, in the Greenlandic communities, we process things in a community. And usually you take care of kids together. Like your grandparents are a part of raising a kid, or your neighbors are a part of making sure that you're okay. And so I think for us to just even have kind of group therapy sessions could be a part of kind of decolonizing what the Western mental health practices
Mm.
are, because that, of course, the mental health practices, we need to make them local and make them fit for the people. And maybe a group therapy or some kind of community practices could benefit and maybe give a redefinition of what Indigenous or just Greenlandic decolonizing process is. And I say decolonizing because I think that's a really important kind of subject for us to start discussing more in Greenland, because I really feel like it could benefit and kind of bring us back to our roots into what is important for us.
My question is going to sound the same as with mental health, but do you think it's talked enough in your community? And do you feel like you have the space to talk about it? Or is it a little bit like everybody knows, but nobody's talking about it? Or is it moving forward?
I think it's still kind of in a process of, it's still a very uncomfortable topic for us. And I think we still haven't really started talking about it because it's so personal to each one of us, that when we start, I think, yeah, it's just a very difficult subject for us to start talking about, but it's so necessary to even just start. And I just think that it could be very much easier for the younger generation to start talking about mental health. I think that we've been better at being aware of what mental health is and the benefits of getting professional help, or the benefits of just having accessible mental health services. So I'm very hopeful for the younger generation that we're going to be kind of more open to receiving services, and hopefully being the last generation that experiences, um, yeah, suicides and all of that. So I think generally, like, I'm very positive that we're going to be able to open up a discussion, especially with the organization, that we'll be able to ask ourselves questions of why we're feeling the way that we do, and actually come up with solutions that we can give to policymakers.
That's a really optimistic. I think I have, yeah, I have maybe one or two last questions. One is, do you have any like recommendation of a book, a music, a film, even a place? I don't know if you want to talk about specific place in Greenland. Like, this is a really open question that I want to ask like everyone at the end of my podcast. So this way we have a lot of recommendation from all over the world. And I don't know if you have any ideas.
I mean, just for well being, I
Yeah.
would recommend just trying to find ways of reconnecting with the older generation's practices. For example, I started making beaded earrings. I think that was very therapeutic for me. Or just going out sailing with my mother and helping her cut up the fish. And I just also started contacting an elder from this town who's going to teach me how to sew sealskin. So a big suggestion to anyone listening would be to find ways that you can teach yourself of cultural practices, because it's very therapeutic for the body and for the mind, and just kind of connecting with elders and having conversations. So yeah, definitely recommend.
That's such a beautiful answer, and that's so better than more question. Look, like that's so much like, of course, on another level. But I really like people in general tend to forget about like, yeah, just all the things you can learn from your own family even, and that's amazing that you contacted someone that is not even your family, I suppose, to just learn a new thing. That's such a good idea. Like if you see someone doing something you want to learn, like just contact this person. That's a really good advice, and that's a better recommendation than any
Aw.
books or movies.
And the thing is, like, elders are always really open to teach you.
Yeah,
And if you ask them, like, the worst thing that can happen is they're gonna say no, or I don't have time. Like, usually they're gonna say yes, because they would love any opportunity to connect with the younger generation.
and to passing on something that is
Yeah.
dear to them. Yeah, that's really great. Finally, who would you pass the mic to for a future episode of this podcast? Like, do you have any idea from maybe Greenland? So I have names for next season.
Ooh, okay. Who could it be? Hmm. It would be, oh, I wish I could suggest everyone. Just
Yeah, no, I get that.
one
That's
out.
a tricky question also. Like,
Just pointing one out. Who could it be? Who could it be? I mean, I think a really interesting conversation could probably be with someone called Miyuki Dayoana. She is from Qaqortoq, which is all the way up in North Greenland. She has actually been a part of the same youth network that we have. She's really, really knowledgeable on, I think she studied anthropology and just very knowledgeable of the cultural and colonial differences that they may be and the colonial kind of maybe mindset that we as Greenlandic people also can have. And it could be really interesting to have that conversation with her, also to get a view of how a young person is questioning the colonial structures that we currently have. So that would be a really interesting conversation.
And then thank you very much, Naya, for your time and for your commitment, all the things you're doing. It's going to be really interesting to see the organization you're building up. I feel so honored, like to have you saying all those things that are so important on this podcast. You're again definitely someone really inspiring. So I really wanted to have you on the podcast, and it was better than my expectations. Basically, I was
Oh,
like, okay, we're gonna have a great conversation as we always have, but I think that it went even further. Like you had really strong words, and you've been really brave to talk about a lot of things. So thank you very much. And yeah, I think we're coming to an end of this.
okay. But thank you also from my side. Like, it's been really nice to kind of be given a space to just talk about things. And I really appreciate your interest in wanting to learn more about young people from other islands.
Thank you very much. Thanks to our guest, and thank you for listening to The Next Wave. Subscribe so you don't miss what's next, and leave a review. It really helps. Don't hesitate to share this episode with an island friend. See you next Wednesday.